But so going back and watching episode 1, season 1 of The Expanse, I can tell, I really can see how influenced you were with Alien, and I think even the opening credits, when I see that, the year, blah, 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 and this is what's happening, and this is the story, I'm in. And that music and that tone, and then you go and then there's this working class vibe, and then you see a whole 'nother culture, series in the belt, and you meet Thomas Jane, you meet Joe Miller. Talk a little bit about that, in terms of how it influenced you and how it directly relates to The Expanse. And I don't want to jump ahead too much, but for instance, they answer a distress call, that kind of pulls them into the adventure.
Yeah, I mean, the parallels are pretty obvious. I mean, Daniel Abraham, my writing partner, and I, when we're working on the books, we're pretty upfront about what we're influenced by, what we're borrowing from, and I'm of the opinion that every creator borrows from the things that have come before. It's
There's so
anybody
much.
who claims that they
Yeah.
don't, is a liar. Alien starts with nothing.
Mhm.
Alien doesn't start with a text scroll. It's the future and people are mining in space and there's a spaceship. Like they don't say anything. They just show you space.
Mhm.
And then they show you the ship. And then we're inside the ship. And for I don't know how many minutes it actually is, but it feels like 5 or 10 minutes. The camera's just moving through the ship.
It absolutely does. I wonder how long that is because I was surprised, going back and watching this, I was surprised at how long that opening was.
Yeah. It's very long.
Yeah.
And and it's very silent.
Yeah.
There's sort of a ship noise, like you assume it's like the engines of the ship or something that's kind of a rumble. But
Mhm.
other than that, there's almost no noise. And then we end up with those screens. And when the screens come on and the text starts going across, that it seems so loud. And the reason it seems so loud is because everything has been so quiet before that. So that text coming on is a startling moment. It
Mhm.
startles you. It's like a jump scare without any jump scare in
Mhm.
that moment when it happens.
Mhm. And it starts
And
lighting up a little bit, so it kinda creates a mystery, like, what is this
ship
thing
starts
that's
turning
happening?
on, and you see lights coming on, and uh, it's such a brilliant, powerful opening.
Mhm.
What we were trying to do with the opening of The Expanse, obviously we couldn't do that. You can get away with things in a feature film you cannot get away with on TV. I guarantee you, no studio in the world is going to. You walk and you go, okay, the opening of my pilot TV show is 10 minutes of nothing. Like no studio in the world is going to be
Yeah.
like, yeah, that sounds great. We should do that. Um, but in our way, in the TV version, we were trying to get some of that where we start out, we're outside Ceres, the asteroid. We see it from a distance. We hear somebody talking, we hear like the belter rabble rouser talking about the disagreements between the inner planets, the belters and the inners. And as we hear him talking about that, we're sort of going past ships, and then we become part of one of those tugs for a moment, and as it flies into the station, and then now we're in the station, and then we fly through the wall, and now we're inside, and we see the various levels of the station as we're flying up through, hearing this guy talk. I mean, it's deliberately one of those moments. It's like that opening of Alien, where it's like, here's where the story's about to take place.
Mm.
Because the thing the opening of Alien does is it tells you what the ship is, and the rest of the story takes place in those sets.
And what I really thought was masterfully done about Alien was you get to know who everybody is, what they do, what their jobs are just by their behavior. Nobody, you weren't told anything. It was patient. You just their interactions, whatever, and then you're like, oh, I guess Ripley's an officer, and then you kind of figure out people's jobs. You kind of figure out, and then you see Parker complaining about this and that, and then you say, okay, well these this is where they are uh, on the hierarchy, and then kind of going through and the class structure, and I felt so that's one of the things I love is like you let the characters do what they do, and that informs you of who they are instead of telling them who they are. And then
Right.
it's just like in life when you get to know people, you're watching them, you're kind of fascinated in the dynamic.
You referenced Parker and Brett, the two guys who are complaining that they don't get as much money as the other characters on the show. And that idea of space as a place filled with blue collar workers
Mhm.
was so powerful to me when I saw Alien. That, I mean, obviously I'd seen original Star Trek. I loved original Star Trek, Kirk and Spock and Bones. those were my jam when I was a kid. Like I watched every episode probably 100 times because the reruns would show every day.
Mhm.
But they were military officers. Kirk was a captain. He was important. Bones was a doctor.
Mhm.
Spock was a Vulcan. He was an educated man. He was a scientist.
Mhm.
And they were all officers in this Starfleet. And, they interacted with admirals and high political officers on other planets. And I thought that's what sci-fi was. I thought sci-fi was those big sort of ideas. And then you watch Alien, and Parker and Brett are truck drivers. Parker and Brett are merchant marines who wander around a leaking ship with pipe wrenches on their tool belts, tightening fittings, fixing burned out motors, and bitching that they don't get paid as much as the officers do. And that was revelatory for me. I was like, oh my God, that is what sci-fi can be. It can be exactly that.
Yeah, it's interesting to me because again, that's the first time I remember seeing that. I know now that it's exists before, but to see that space travel that is so lived in and so worn that it's not even a thing anymore, and the way that they communicated with each other, there was something so comforting about that working class vibe. And
Yeah.
I actually doing the research for this, I actually heard about Dark Star, and I never saw Dark Star, and I
Yep.
went back and I watched a little bit of Dark Star, and there is that kind of same vibe where they're on the ship and they're kind of just going through the motions and doing
Yep.
their thing. But reading the Expanse and reading the when I first got the pilot as well, like going through and reading about the Canterbury, I immediately recognized right off. It's like, oh, this is that same vibe, that same thing that I love so much with aliens, and I loved it so much that it's so disappointing that the people that we end up meeting and falling in love with or whatever, they ended up, uh, getting blown up.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the Canterbury is absolutely a callback to the Nostromo. Um, that that and if we're getting away from series now and going on to sort of the introduction of our space crew with Holden and Amos and Naomi and Alex. And those early episodes, Shed. Getting to meet those people. It's the same kind of thing. We follow Holden and Naomi and Amos through a long corridor of the ship and into a lift. And they're talking about things that need to be fixed on the ship. Naomi's complaining because she doesn't have the budget she needs to fix the things that need to be fixed. And she's saying, you need to talk to corporate. You need to talk to the bosses. You need to tell them we need more money to fix this stuff. And as she's saying it, shit in the lift is breaking. And she's
Yeah,
banging on it, right?
right.
And then they come out and they go down another long corridor and they go out into sort of the I guess the bridge of the ship, but it's not a Star Trek bridge. It's not ultra clean, brightly lit, with like chairs arrayed for everybody to see. It's consoles jammed into a space that's too small for them. It feels like we had this little room, we had to put a lot of desks in it, and we just sort of jammed desks wherever they would fit, and that's where people work. And people are complaining in there. You've got Ade is complaining about stuff. You've got Becca complaining about stuff. The captain calls Holden in and tries to give him a promotion, and Holden's too lazy. He's like, yeah, I don't want a fucking promotion. I like my job. I don't have to do shit, right? It's exactly that sort of vibe to everything. And
And also it's the relaxed protocol. You got Alex sliding down the stair. He's got earphones on. Like that can't be, regulation. Like people, they've been out of space and kind of away from it for so long. They're rolling down their uniforms. They're,
yeah,
got stains on their outfits and
trust me, nobody there is in the military. These
right, right.
these these are truck drivers. These are merchant marines, and not to make you uncomfortable, but I mean, Amos is the ultimate depiction of that. When we meet Amos, he's following Naomi around in the same way. Remember how Brett followed Parker everywhere?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
Amos following Naomi as if she's Parker, right?
Yeah.
He's got a tool when we meet him. He's got a toolbox in his hand. He's got his like jumpsuit on for it's covered in grease stains. Um,
Right.
Holden says, "Hey, you got a pry bar?" Of course, Amos has one. He just immediately whips it out of his toolbox.
It's too funny. Yeah.
Like he just got it, right? Like, oh yeah, of course I've got a pry bar. I might need to pry something later. You know, um, and And it's funny because Amos's big concern in that scene is none of the stuff anybody else was talking about. His big concern is he better get that pry bar back because he's going
Yeah,
to need it later, right? Like,
absolutely.
better get that back, right?
And
Um,
there's a connection and relationship that he has to his tools,
yeah,
value that he has in them and in his trade and what he does, and so he gives them that, that pry bar, but that's that that shit better get back to him. That's an important thing.
and it's funny that you mentioned that because one of the things that we always do in props with any Amos prop is if it's something Amos cares about, he writes his name on it.
Right. Yeah.
All of his toolboxes have his name on them.
Right.
Like, and it's almost kind of a funny, big childish scrawl. But if you see a toolbox and it has the name Amos on it, you don't fucking touch those tools.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you leave that alone unless he says it's okay.
One thing I'm really curious about for you is I just enjoy the crew and the captain of the Canterbury so much.
Yeah.
What was your reasoning for creating them knowing their fate? What was going behind that? What uh
I mean, that is the reason.
okay.
Um, the reason that a movie like Alien takes so long getting to the moment where the shit starts to hit the fan is by the time people start to die, we have to love those people. I have to really care when Brett gets killed in the water chain room. Um, I have to want Ripley to survive. I have to want Dallas when Dallas is crawling through the air ducts and they're telling him the aliens coming on him. My heart has to be pounding. I have to really want Dallas to get away. Um, and the
And,
only way you can do that is oh, go ahead.
and just to add something to that, and then we'll come back to it. But one of the things that Alien does so well, because if you think about when it came out in 1979, but when I watch it, when you see the Tom Skerritt character, when you see Dallas, you immediately are like, oh, he's gonna survive. He's the hero. He's it's
Hero.
fucking him.
Yeah.
And when he dies, I was like, what? And
And he
then I'm waiting for him to come back. I'm waiting for I'm like, wait, I've never seen the hero
yep.
die and then everybody get picked off like that. And to me, because people talk about Game of Thrones and how they did it, whatever. The first time I saw it was with Alien, and that blew my mind. I'm so used to as a kid, like seeing movies that the captain, the guy was the hero, Tom Skerritt, he was going to make it all the way through, and he died, and that really threw me. And that goes back to the Canterbury. What you're talking about before I interrupted you is I connect to these people, and I'm like, oh, these are the people I'm going to be living with and having
Right.
adventures with.
Yeah, and the only way to do that is to kind of make you love them. So Joe Pingay, who played the captain, um, was perfect for that part because Holden meets with him. Joe's playing like this like lovable teddy bear of a captain. Like he knows what he wants. He's the boss, right? We see him lay his foot down a couple times. He's definitely the boss. But you get the feeling like you'd like to serve on a ship with that guy. He's funny. Like when he's talking about his cats, that's one of the funniest moments of the pilot.
Dude, I love that. And what is the connection from the cats, and what gave you that idea?
Well, we'll never say. One of those. No, honestly, the truth is, I think it was just one of those funny little moments that Mark and Hawk put in the pilot script.
Oh, okay.
Because you got to give people weird little quirks and stuff. I think Mark and Hawk just put that in the pilot script because they thought it was funny.
Right,
And,
right,
but it works because Joe lands it so well. Like he's
right,
when he does his little under the breath, those are mine. Um, it's one of the funniest moments on the show, and because of that, we love him. Right?
right.
We love Joe. Becca, the
That's so true. As soon as I saw that and I laugh out loud, I'm like, I like that guy.
that guy,
It's
yeah.
something quirky and
And the rivalry between Becca and Ade, where they kind of sniping back and forth. We're like, oh, that's gonna be a thing. The show will every episode will have a moment where Becca and Ade are sniping at each other. It feels like you're laying the groundwork for a crew for a long running show. Everybody feels very realized. Everybody feels very real, right? And because of that, it's the Tom Skerritt thing. It's there's no way that all of those people that I just spent 20 minutes learning to love just died. But because we spent the time to do that, and because we did give them more than just paper thin characterization, when that ship blows up, it's supposed to be a shocking moment. It's supposed to feel like, wait, this show is not what I thought it was. Something else is happening here. Something way bigger is happening here.
and it's heartbreaking, and what also I love is that what ends up becoming the Rossi crew, the way that this crew is introduced, they're not highlighted in any special way. There's not anything to say, okay, these are going to be the heroes that you're going to follow. They're
Right.
just a part of the crew. They're number one, and it could have randomly been any other handful of people at Canterbury that went to answer that distress call,
Yeah.
and that's what
And
really.
and we have people arguing that they don't want to get on the ship, right? You know,
Mhm.
when they talk about the mission, you've got people on the bridge. They're going, "No way, I'm going."
Right, right. Kinda like when they go down to the planet to answer the distress call, there's people that like, "I'm not going down there to do that."
Parker and Brett are arguing that if they have to go down to the planet, they should get paid overtime.
Yeah,
You're like, well, are we getting paid to do that? Because if I'm not getting paid to go down to that planet, I'm not going down there.
and then they
Which,
tell them about the distress clause and what's in there, and if they don't answer, they don't get paid for anything, and, I love that stuff.
exactly. Yeah, it's all of that stuff. Uh, all of that goes into building a shocking moment. If you start out and like if we, one of the things when we were first developing the season, the pilot script had been written, but the pilot script was much longer. It took in much more of the first book than the pilot script we actually shot. And one of the things we talked about was in that version of the pilot, the Canterbury is destroyed in like the first 10 minutes of the pilot. So it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't matter. Who cares? Right. You're in such a rush to get to that moment and past it that this thing, and by the way, the destruction of the Canterbury is supposed to haunt Holden for the entire first season. It's supposed to haunt him. If we're rushing past it and we don't ever get any connection to the people on the ship and we just blow it up in the first 10 minutes, that won't land. It won't make any sense. We won't understand why Holden is so devastated by that. Yeah. So, I mean, all of that goes into developing the story.
Yeah.
And it's riffing on Alien taking 40 minutes before anybody dies.
So, what about the distress call, were you influenced by Alien that they went to?
Of
Yeah.
course I was. How could I not be? I mean, now, to be fair, the distress call in space is a trope that shows up over and over and over in sci-fi. There's a million sci-fi things that we're traveling through space, we get a distress call, something terrible happens.
Uh-huh.
It's Alien did not invent that,
Right.
but Alien was so formative to me when I watched it. I'm sure that that's what was in my head when I was creating the game and then later the books is that moment of we got a distress call. And I mean, even in the books and the show, the same kind of argument happens where you've got, we have to stop for this distress call. And other people in the crew are like, no, fuck that. Why would I do that? That gains me nothing. Like, that just feels like a giant waste of my time.
I know what side of the fence you would be on, Ty, when it came to answering this distress call. You'd be like, hell no, we're headed back to Earth.
Well, I mean, if they got themselves stuck in space, that's kind of their fault, right?